Welcome back to another episode of The Hardcore Casual with your boy, Bass the Kid. As always, like and subscribe. Please share with a friend, a colleague, an associate, a family member, an immediate one, a distant relative, an enemy, anyone in between. I appreciate all the views. I've probably got about 5 videos worth of stuff I could speak about, but I haven't got time for that. So what I'm going to do, probably 1 to 2, maybe even 3 videos to drop within the next day or so before the weekend wrap. But there's been quite a bit that's happened over this week. I haven't had a chance to get through some of it because I've been trying some different content, but we're here now. So without further ado, let's get into it. So earlier this week, Eubank Jr went on Talk Sport with Jim White and Simon Jordan. And in this interview, he basically stated that number one, he believed that Benn was totally innocent of any particular wrongdoing with regards to, the test he had with the failed PD test, the clomiphene or whatever. He basically said, well, the reason that tells me he's innocent is because he went onto the biggest platform possible, that Piers Morgan, and basically stepped into the light, so to speak. He said if you do something like that, the one thing you don't do is step into the light. You try and hide in the shadows and you try and basically let things brush under the carpet. He's like, well, no, he's not allowing it to brush under the carpet. That tells me that something that he is innocent, but more so it's the people that he has around him, the handlers that he has around him, the promoters that he has around him, that is the cause. So clearly within there, taking aim, I guess, at Tony Sims, whoever his manager is. I don't know who manages Benn. Eddie Hearn. Can't think of anyone else potentially, but it brings me back to that press conference they had back in, I think it was 2017, when he was on the table and Conor was on the table, and he was basically saying that Nigel Benn should be around him because there's bad people around who will basically potentially lead him down the dark path. That's why he stays so close to his son, to make sure that those type of things don't happen. And I remember Conor was obviously very upset by the comments. He's like, no, you don't speak on my personal life. If you want to talk about me, talk about my boxing and my boxing ability. That's it. Don't talk about my personal life. Like, who are you to speak on things that I've gone through, or who I'm around, or whatever. So it's funny because look, these things kind of come full circle to a degree, because ultimately Eubank Sr is absolving Conor of all blame and is basically just reverting back to that exact same press conference where he said this young lad is innocent, but someone somewhere is basically doing bad things and Conor is unaware of it. I can understand why he feels that way, but ultimately, again, when we talk about the strict liability and all that sort of stuff, like, Conor is the one that has to prove either it was not in the system and it's contamination, or if it was in the system, it was in there via a contaminated source that occurred, maybe on the lead up to the fight night, or to a point where it wasn't able to provide any benefits in kind in terms of performance or whatnot. And he's still got a hard task on his hand, to be totally honest. So that's a bit of a shame but it's interesting that sort of Eubank Sr is really riding the support train for Conor, especially when you consider that it was his son that he was going to get into the ring with. But the interview itself got even more interesting when Mr. Senior basically was like, well, with me in the corner, Chris would never lose to the likes of a Liam Smith, basically implying that Liam Smith is actually not of a necessary standard to be able to beat a focused Eubank Jr. But with Junior going off doing his own thing, not listening to other people, not heeding advice, you know, that's why you get beat by the likes of a Liam Smith. Now, quite frankly, I thought that was very disrespectful, but I mean, that's his dad, so I can't really say that I would expect him to not think like that. But ultimately, like, Liam Smith is a former world champion. He's a world level operator. He's, you know, he's definitely at world level. I wouldn't say he's elite, but he is up there. And if you are up there, then that means that you should be in 50-50 fights with him. And if you're not at that level, he will beat you. And that's exactly what he did. So yeah, I thought that was a bit bad, but it was interesting. Then he basically went on to say that Junior doesn't listen, and specifically this was basically his pushback when Simon Jordan said, well, hold on, you talk about the Nick Blackwell and the Avni Yildirim fights, but what about George Groves? What about Billy Joe Saunders? They were done under your watch, weren't they? And it's almost funny how, you know, Senior tried to pass the buck on those, well, no, but he doesn't listen. So did he listen in those other two, which were the quote unquote, you know, perfect performances? There was a lot of contradictions in there. I won't get into the whole stuff about, you know, the Queen and riding the front of the bus and all that stuff. I don't really care for any of that, to be totally honest. But it's interesting when he says, so basically Chris hasn't listened from day dot, and apparently David Haye is in the camp saying he just doesn't listen, he's not doing what he's being told to do, so basically it's old habits dying hard. And he said the only person he probably does listen to is Roy Jones Jr. The only thing that Roy has taught him is patience, but that patience has not been able to be infused with, you know, the combination punching, the punching in style, and all of the other stuff that made him who he was as a younger fighter. But then it's weird because Senior says Junior doesn't listen, but then he also said that when he had Ronnie, so in the corner, and basically he was like, well, ultimately his job was just to let me do my own thing. He would offer assistance where needed. He would wipe the sweat from my brow. He would get me a drink. I would lavish all the praise upon him in the public, but all he was meant to do was just to be in there and allow me to do what I wanted to do, because I knew what I was doing. So then, does that not sound like your son? So is your son not then the spitting image of you? And the fact that you're upset is basically because he is now a mirror of what you were like, except for the fact that he doesn't have your talent. Because you're saying that you never listened. You did your own thing. Your trainer was only there to just watch you be great, ultimately. Well, Chris Jr. is basically saying the same thing. Like, I don't need you to do anything other than give me a drink when I need it, wipe the sweat from my brow when I need it, and, you know, put some Vaseline on my face when I need it. To me, it sounds like it's a mirror. It's literally it's the older version watching the younger version of themselves, and they don't like the way they acted because that was them at that age, and they realized that how naive and stupid they looked at that particular point in time. That's what it kind of seems like. And then they played the clip of when Simon Jordan said that, you know, he felt that Chris Eubank Jr. was a charlatan, and Jim White pressed Senior on it a couple times, and Senior said, well, look, my silence should tell you everything, but I don't know if that was supposed to be my silence should tell you that I'm uncomfortable with you asking me this question, or that's still my child, or my silence is basically I'm in compliance with you, and I agree, but I'm not going to tell you that live on air, because ultimately that is still my son. He seems very hurt also, look, with the whole thing about the letter that Junior wrote him saying, yeah, I'm the captain now. Ultimately, you can be a part of the team, but you don't have a say in what goes on. You're just there for moral support, or however it was dropped. I can understand how that maybe hurt his ego and his pride, but this is definitely a pride thing. This isn't, about Junior kicking him out. It's probably about Junior diminishing a role that Senior believed there's absolutely no way. It's almost like, I guess, if you're in a job and you're the manager, or you're like that, you run the office that you're in, but then all of a sudden they bring in like a divisional manager that basically oversees your office and other offices, and now you've got to report to this guy, when before everyone reported to you, and maybe you just went straight to the head honcho at the top. Now you've got to go to this guy, who then is going to take your information to the head honcho at the top. So you feel a bit diminished. I've had that in jobs before, where you're like, hold on a minute, who are you? Like, I've got the connection to the main man. Why do I have to go through you for? So I kind of get it in that sense, but it's all ego, and he's got to get his ego in check if he wants to get back into that setup. But ultimately, I think that whole thing is fractured at this point. It will be very interesting to find out what does happen moving forward with all of them. But there's a lot of hurt within there. Obviously, Senior is still grieving. You can tell that he's still grieving. He's still going through stuff that he's going through. I don't know if these kind of interviews are the right thing for him in this headspace, because everything's raw, and ultimately when you're in pain, you lash out. And I feel like, hurt people. At this moment, he's hurt and he's grieving, and he's, in his own eccentric way, probably trying to spread and even some of that hurt out to get it off of his system. It's not great to see. It's not something I particularly like to comment on again, but I do hope that can kind of all get resolved and worked out in the future. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that situation and what's going on. You can let me know yours down below. Speaking of fathers and sons, so John Fury has done several interviews over the last couple of days, where essentially he has said that Alexander Usyk will never get a Tyson Fury fight unless he writes a written apology, I think on social media, for accusing Tyson of being the one that prevented the fight from happening earlier on this year, and basically admitting that there was lies told, fabrications and all sorts of stuff like that. I haven't watched the interviews, but I've seen some of the clips. Now, I mean, first of all, that's not going to happen ultimately. Well, were there some embellishments and maybe misdirections on the Usyk side? I reckon so. I'm not naive enough to believe that they were 100% with honor and total integrity. I believe there was about 90%. I believe there was probably a 10% in there where they felt, you know what, these things, they're piling up. Let's just kind of throw them out there, see which ones we can make stick the most, and we will go off, do our mandatory, and we will revisit this later on when there's more money to be made and to be offered in this fight. Because ultimately, I think they was prepared to take the fight at Wembley, but under the proviso that since you asked for a rematch initially, since you're trying to stiff me of essentially 40% of the total earnings within this fight, all right, if that's the case, then when I beat you and you ask for a rematch of this fight, which I'm sure you will do, then I get the exact same terms you got in the first fight. When all of that started to kind of not go that way, it's like, well, hold on, then it should be 50-50, because we're both not earning what we could have been earning from the Saudi deal. And yeah, ultimately, okay, we're gonna do this Dubois thing, cool. I'm gonna take short money here, but I'm gonna make up for it at the end of the year when I face you. But now you've got John Fury basically saying, no, I don't, that's not gonna happen unless such and such. Now look, John ultimately doesn't have total say, but there's a lot of things that John does say that ultimately ends up happening or not happening in this case. So I wouldn't be surprised if that Usyk Fury fight doesn't happen in December. I mean, I didn't think it would anyway. I've got my own thoughts on that. I think I've stated it in previous videos. If I haven't, you know, you guys, I'm sure you'll hear it. Anyway you follow me, I would have said similar things. But yeah, it's just such a weird statement. And then lo and behold, also today, John Fury's talking about how basically Sugar Hill Stewart is just a hired hand, essentially. Like, he didn't really do anything specific with Tyson. Look at the job he done with Lawrence Okoli, for instance. Like, he's, you know, he's just another guy, you know, leeching a paycheck off of Tyson. And if I was him, I'd wind him up and let him go. Now, obviously, all of this is because, you know, Sugar Hill Stewart didn't go along with the story that, oh yeah, Tyson's ready to train, he's ready for the Wembley fight. And Sugar Hill's like, well, I haven't been here I'm not here to train him. I didn't know about any assignment. I came in for the Lawrence Okoli fight, and I'm going straight home on Monday. Like, so because he didn't play ball and, you know, basically back the story, I guess, you know, John is calling him like a Benedict Arnold, or, you know, like a Judas to the camp. And he's now, you know, not happy with him. The same as he ended up not being happy with Ben Davison, and I guess not being happy with Peter Fury. There's clearly, he's like a control freak on a whole different level, and I wouldn't be surprised if even his children probably don't want to be around him, or are trying to find ways to kind of get out from under the John Fury stronghold. But I don't know how Traveller Life works, and I don't know what the hierarchy is like, and, you know, if it's basically like unwritten rule that father's rule is law and it must be obeyed or whatever, because in some cultures it's like that. So as much as you want to get away, you just can't, and that's how it is. I don't know. If there is any travellers watching, you can let me know. Is there anything like that as a reason as to why John Fury seems to have so much power and influence in this situation, apart from just being the dad of the boxer? But yeah, ultimately, look, there's gonna be no apology, no like retraction from Fury, from Usyk's side, because I'm not saying they didn't do anything wrong, but the entire public knows exactly what happened here, and there's no amount of spin that John can do, that Frank Warren can do, that Devsani can do, Tommy Fury, what's the other one's name, Roman Fury, or any of the others. You know, there's nothing that any of them can do, basically. Even, what's his name, the other Huey Fury, none of them can spin this narrative back in Fury's you know, favor, because there's too much that's gone on, there's too much that people have witnessed to then say, no, we almost don't care now. And it's a shame, because it is definitely the man who cried wolf. So even now, when he is potentially telling the truth, or there are things that were maybe said that were incorrect, or that were, you know, fabricated or embellished, no one's going to believe you, and no one's going to care that happened to you, because of everything that has gone before then. So yeah, that's a bit of a situation, I suppose. But look, ultimately, them's the breaks. What are you gonna do? With that being said, I'm gonna leave this one. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. Look out for future episodes coming up. But for right now, it's the Hardcore Casual out.